to see Gary. Got it.
Yeah, I don't know how I set up the session.
And
so
you
that
want
I
this
have-
on the record, right?
Well, so now we're recording, Kim. I'll meet you at the co-op tomorrow when we are picking up some wine from Carl, and you can tell me then. Okay.
Well, it looks like, let me see, I can end the poll now. Did everybody get their vote in? Yeah, I think so.
No. Wait,
Oh,
did
no?
you? That's fine.
Well, I'm going to share the results.
Okay.
It's a-
Okay. Obviously, people weren't picking on Kim like I was, so you know what I want to hear. So we're all good.
So it looks like it's a dead tie between Elizabeth Taylor and Celine Dion. So that means that Gary's going to have to go quickly, which it's going to be hard. He has so much material. So
Okay,
Well,
we'll
it's-
just cut me off when you need to, and we can get to the stuff people want to hear. So
okay, so I'm gonna go back to the slides, and we'll just keep on. There you go. So Gary DeVaughn is a Hollywood historian. He was taking a family vacation when he was young, and he came across the Grauman's Man's Chinese Theater, and it never has looked back. He's been fascinated by Hollywood's movie studios, the studio system, starlets, and he has made it his mission to learn as much as he can about all of it. So
is that cue for me to go?
yeah. Ta-da!
Yeah, ta-da. Yeah, well, there we got a lovely image there. Those are great. Thank you, Brenda. Those are so fun. I love it. Yeah, if somebody asked me when I was 15 or 16 what I wanted to do when I grew up, my answer probably was to a few people, I just want to walk around movie studios and hold hands with movie stars and have them tell me about their day. And that's basically what I wanted to do with my life. So I did the next best thing, and that was move to Los Angeles, get work in the entertainment industry, but not before. I didn't sneak into and onto every studio in town, both motion picture and television, and hunt down the old timers and have them tell me what stories they knew because they were there that lived it. And because this was 32 plus years ago, quite a few of the legendary stars were still with us. So I had plenty of time to encounter lots of them, especially at charity events. They love a charity event. And I was just very fortunate to encounter some of the people that I just loved growing up, and suddenly there I was having conversation with them. It was always fun whenever the conversation would be going and they would keep it going. And I'd be thinking, oh, shouldn't I step away now? Isn't it somebody else's turn? But those were always great times too. So
well, it's always so interesting because you know so much about their lives and what's going on that your questions were natural, and they were interested in having a conversation with you.
Yeah, and I have a friend that jokes with me. He says, Gary, you can never encounter a celebrity without saying, this isn't the first time we've met. So I get a kick out of that. And I thought, yeah, he's kind of right. I do.
Was this your first job at Paramount then, or no?
That was my first big show business job, certainly. I had done some PA work on some commercials, but nothing that involved any big talent or shot at any of the big facilities in town. So yeah, I moved here October of '88, and I got that job at Paramount in July of 1990. I had filled those previous 2 years with, again, sneaking into this very studio. And the other big thing I enjoyed doing was going to all the local cemeteries and getting to know where some of the great stars were laid to rest. And award shows were a big thing too. It was easy to sneak into award shows in those days. Very easy, not like today. Technology is not on my side in that regard. So there we have a shot of the Paramount Studios there. It's basically a complete 65 acres right in the heart of Los Angeles. And over the years, many a developer has tried to get their hands on this property. But as long as people keep watching television and going to the movies, the studio will stay. Even though this is considered one of the smaller properties, it certainly has a very mighty history because Paramount has been at this property on Melrose Avenue since 1926, even though they were founded in 1912 in New York City. Because right next door to Paramount was the legendary RKO Studios. And then in the late 1950s, Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz purchased RKO, and it became one of 3 Desilu properties. So there's just a great deal of history just in that one piece of property alone. And then with that, you still have MGM's great history and Warner Brothers and 20th Century Fox and Republic. There's just so much out there. This is a great shot because if it's not broken, don't fix it. So there you see a shot of Lucy and Desi in 1959, and then you see that same location as it looks today, and it really has not changed very much, except for the logo on the water tower there. Paramount did have their own water tower, but they kept the RKO Desilu water tower. So that's a nice homage to history. That gate that Desi and Lucy are standing in front of there has since been removed. It's now a walking promenade on the Paramount lot. And that picture of Lucy and Desi you see there, that was taken on what is now Paramount's soundstage number 6. And if any of you were big Mork and Mindy fans, that's where the TV show Mork and Mindy was shot.
Well, there it is.
Yeah. So is everybody seeing what I'm seeing, I take it?
Yeah.
So if I'm talking about the images, okay, great. So
Yep,
there we are.
yeah, I think you were going a little backwards there, but yeah, oh my gosh. So I'm sorry. Look at that buffalo check. Fantastic. And also very relevant because obviously is it the Amazon Prime that right now has the big film about Lucy and Desi with is it Javier Bardem and
that's right, and Nicole Kidman. Yeah.
So
who just won the Golden Globe.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yes. Amazing.
And what's interesting about that piece, because everyone is running to me going, what'd you think? What'd you think? What'd you think? I was watching that just to see if they got the locations right. When they were talking about Desilu, if they were showing the correct property, and they did a very good job. They really did their homework. But I think what people will come away with that more than anything is what it really takes to put together something so joyful. There's a lot of stress. There's a lot of jealousy. There's a lot of underhandedness involved, all that to create something that is considered one of the great joys from the entertainment industry that was given to the world. I Love Lucy, Here we are outside. This is a shot of one of Lucy's dressing rooms on the Desilu Gower lot. And you can see the bougainvillea around the doorway there, freshly planted in 1958, 59, when she took over that dressing room. But like I said, this used to be the original RKO studio. So when Lucy was a very young contract player in the early 1930s, I think she came to RKO in 1933, that was Ginger Rogers' dressing room. That was considered one of the big female star dressing rooms on the lot. So all those years later, Lucy got to occupy that dressing room. A lot of those dressing rooms and bungalows do still exist at a lot of the studios, but most of them have been converted to office space. But in fact, if you want to go on YouTube and type in Lucille Ball's dressing room, there's footage of me giving a tour of what the inside of that building looks like today. And you have to kind of use your imagination to think how lovely it looked at the time that she was occupying that space. In fact, at this time, she had 2 dressing rooms on the lot. This was more for work and formal gatherings with staff. And then she had the more luxurious palatial dressing room where she would receive the press, Hedda Hopper, Luella Parsons, those people, Walter Winchell possibly, and dignitaries.
So Hedda Hopper was a seamstress, right? Or no, she was the author. Publicist.
She was one of the big gossip columnists,
That's
yeah,
right. Okay.
who worked directly under William Randolph Hearst. So for Hedda Hopper to come to that property, formerly RKO, where Citizen Kane was shot, was a big deal because Citizen Kane was directly based on the history of William Randolph Hearst, and Hedda Hopper did everything in her power in 1940 to squash that screenplay from being made, but Orson Welles got it done. So, yes. So backstory for this is a wrought iron flower cart. And for years and years and years growing up, when I was growing up, would come to Los Angeles, I always would peek through Lucille Ball's back fence. And one thing I could always see in that backyard was this wrought iron flower cart. And then a couple of years after Lucy's passing, the current owners of the house were going to throw it away. And so I found this out by talking to one of the gardeners. And so I went back later that night with my pickup truck and I went into the backyard and pulled it out of the foot of mud it was stuck in and brought it home with me, and have since had it completely restored. It was sandblasted and it was painted beautifully and glaze was baked on it. So it's in really, really good condition. So not looking to sell it anytime soon. It brings a lot of joy to me.
And that's how you get to meet a lot of people, is by striking up conversations with the people that work or support staff.
If you can get through to them, you can usually get through to the actor or the director or producer, whoever it is that you want to talk to. Yeah, you have to kind of prove yourself to be non-threatening, I suppose. Here we are in the old Columbia Studios back lot. And if you don't recognize that house, probably the first time it was used in something real specific was Dennis the Menace. He lived in this house. And then I think another generation would really know it because that's where Barbara Eden lived as Jeannie in I Dream of Jeannie.
So what about the bottle there?
Well, God, you can't be a fan of I Dream of Jeannie and not have your own Jeannie bottle. Great piece of trivia, when they were putting that show together, and they knew that he had to find her in some kind of container. Aladdin's lamp had been done 100 times. So they were looking for something a little more elegant. And that bottle that you see was painted to look that way. But when you bought that bottle in 1964, 65, it contained Jim Beam whiskey. That was their Christmas decanter for that year, for that season, that holiday season. And so they were only made for about a year, year and a half. And collectors now are collecting them. You can find them on eBay. There are people who will paint them professionally so that it looks just like it did on the television show. And it was a great treat to go onto that lot with my bottle. It's just like a dream come true for me. There's a little nerdy kid. So here we are at the Minnelli residence. The picture on the left was taken with me backstage at a Liza Minnelli concert. And then there's a picture you'll see of Liza Minnelli and her father, Vincent Minnelli, the great film director, who directed the Oscar-winning film An American in Paris. And of course, Meet Me in St. Louis with Judy Garland, which introduced the song, Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas to the world. And then Vincent Minnelli met Liza's mother, Judy Garland, while directing her in that film. And Liza was born a year and a half later. This photograph was taken in Vincent Minnelli's home on Sunset Boulevard and Crescent, right across from the Beverly Hills Hotel. And sometime during the selling of the house, it literally was kind of left in a state of being just open. And it kind of has gone down in show business history that this house was left open with no locks on any of the doors. And of course, I had to find my way in there one day, and I did. And there I found that photograph of Liza and her father. And so I had my picture taken in the exact spot where they are in the picture, the red couch with the white covered doors behind us. So this town, if you move here, you can have lots of adventures like this if you want to seek them out. And I've certainly had my share of them. And there I am recreating, this is a photograph of Deanna Durbin and Judy Garland on the MGM lot. The MGM lot is now owned by Sony. Sony is the parent company to Columbia and TriStar. So a lot of the Sony films are made on this property, the old MGM studios, where Judy Garland was under contract for many years. She's with Deanna Durbin. Deanna Durbin went on to be a big Universal Studios star. She was more of an operatic singer. And Judy, of course, was more of a pop jazz singer. But the studio put them both in a short film together called Every Sunday, and it was basically a screen test to see which one of the girls they would keep. And of course, it turned out to be Judy that they kept. And I took that photograph with my friend Andy. I tried to get as close to that exact spot as possible. The picture with me, you can see the staircase over my shoulder. I couldn't get right in front of it because there was a temporary gymnasium built there, but I did my best to recreate it with the time that I had, with everybody.
You know that
staring at me.
Judy Garland is from Minnesota?
That's right, she's from Grand Rapids, Minnesota. That's right. Here I am again. This is an example, talking to Brenda about this. Debbie Reynolds had just been put under contract to MGM. But yet she was now this MGM movie star, signed to the greatest, most prestigious studio in motion picture history. But yet she was still bringing her lunch to work every day. So I took this photograph of me sitting in the exact spot next to the soundstage. I believe that soundstage 25, and that would have been Munchkinland, and the Wizard of Oz was constructed on that soundstage there. And I sometimes even would bring my lunch to work too. So I was in good company there. And there's Elizabeth Taylor, who was under contract to MGM for most of her life. she was put under contract to MGM, and they loaned her to Paramount in 1950 to star in a film called A Place in the Sun with, that's Montgomery Clift standing with her. They're actually leaning next to Soundstage 5 at Paramount. And for television buffs, that ended up being the soundstage where the Brady Bunch was shot. And you'll notice how with the picture with Elizabeth, the alley is wide open, but the picture with me, you see a wall is there with a door. That door was put there. They built a small temporary space for the classrooms used by the children from the TV show The Brady Bunch. That's where their classrooms were, through that door. So that's me recreating that scene. But what this really represents is, let's say Elizabeth Taylor was, when she was under contract to MGM, let's say her salary was $1,500 a week. MGM would loan Elizabeth to Paramount, and they would be making $10,000 a week by loaning her to Paramount. But of course, Elizabeth Taylor would only get her $1,500. So you can see how the studios really could control their stars and make a lot of money off of them when they weren't making anywhere near as much. Which is why I think when TV shows today like Friends and Seinfeld are asking for these astronomical salaries, and everybody says, well, how could they make all that money? Just to let you know that studios are making still a great deal more than the actors are who are actually in the product itself. So just depends on how you want to look at it. Yes, one of the great films, not noir, but Grand Guignol, they call this type of film. Bette Davis, one of the great stars of Hollywood's golden era from the 30s all the way through the 50s. And Joan Crawford, who co-starred with Betty in this film. That's not Joan, whose back is to us there. That's another actress. These two actresses, by the time it was the early 60s, had kind of been forgotten about by Hollywood. The studios didn't want to make movies with older actresses that were one-time glamour girls. If they did, they wanted them to play grandmothers and housekeepers and you know, the nutty neighbor next door. And Joan Crawford found this book called Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. And she approached Betty. Betty and she didn't know each other well. They had certainly respected each other because they were both queens of their respective studios. Betty was the great Warner Brothers grand dame actress. And of course, Joan was the big contract player at MGM. Now, there's always been talk of a great feud between the two actresses. I think the reason that happens is because in 1944, Joan was fired by MGM in 1942, and she was offered a contract from Warner Brothers at a much lower salary. So she waited and waited and waited to get the right script, the right screenplay before she made her first film there. It turned out to be a part that was turned down by Bette Davis and Barbara Stanwyck. So a lot of people think that the feud started because Joan ended up winning the Oscar for that part. That part was Mildred Pierce, Warner Brothers 1945. So a lot of people think, oh, Betty should have had that part. She would have won the Oscar. But they wouldn't, as years went by, later years, they both spoke about each other with great reverence. So I think the feud was more of just a made up studio publicity thing. And this film, this shot here was taken at the house here in Hancock Park, just about 10 minutes south from where I am in West Hollywood. And that's McCadden Avenue. And the house looks very much the same today as it did then in 1961.
You mean
Yay.
studios made up stories for publicity? Did they?
Oh, there's no doubt about it. They would completely change everything about you to get you to be more appealing to the public. From something as simple as a name change to your family background. Oh, they would change everything about you to make you appear more appealing to the public. And that was really big in the silent era, in the silent years, because so many of these people that came to Hollywood, especially in the silent years, they were just kids from small towns and dirt roads. And because they had something appealing about them, people in the film industry, you know, made them into movie stars. And many people who were stars in the silent era did not transfer well once talkies came in the late 1920s, because their personality just wasn't there. Their speaking voice was maybe too high pitched, or maybe they had a speaking disability like a lisp or a stutter. So a lot of stars didn't transfer from the silent years to the sound years. I forgot where I was going with that, but
We were talking about publicity and stuff, but go ahead.
the control the studios had, the control. So yeah, if a studio, if your name was John Smith, you know, they would change it to Cary Grant. Actually, Cary Grant's real name was Archibald Leach. So that's a perfect example of stars taking you and completely molding you and making you into something that that they wanted.
they set them up on dates too, didn't they? And make them
There's
go
no
out.
doubt about, oh,
Yeah.
certainly, especially their young actors, the men, especially if they were, if they were gay. Absolutely, those studios, they put you up with the pretty young starlets and made it look like you were dating them by having you photograph with them, not only at movie premieres and restaurants, but they would say, all right, Jill's coming to your house this week and we're gonna get pictures of you two in the pool and pictures of you two shopping. Also, those young stars, when they were put under contract, in addition to being completely molded by the studios in as far as who they were and who they were perceived to be, the studios had to teach them how to be proper young ladies and gentlemen. So they would teach the young actors under contract how to order the proper wines with dinner, teaching them how to hold the door open for whoever was that they were out with. They really taught them to be proper young ladies and gentlemen. And so the women would go in and they were taught how to talk to a couturier when they would go to the design houses and meet with the great designers, not only at the studio, but also, if they were shopping in Beverly Hills or Paris or New York. So they really taught them how to be just be more of an educated person in the world. There's another shot there of the Columbia backlot. Did you want to add to that, Brenda?
No, hi, this is Shelley. I was going to ask a quick question. Because what's so interesting about, and I feel Kim Jensen has a question in here, and I feel like this kind of is a preface to what I'm going to mention. Kim Jensen has a question saying Judy is a good example of how the studio controlled actors. And what's interesting, and I think anybody who has hung out with us tonight has heard me talk about how I love celebrity, and I do. What strikes me as interesting is that the studio bosses went away. You see how these studios controlled actors and they fed the media these stories, and you hear these horror stories about what happened to Judy Garland and all of these things. But would you say that social media kind of took the place of those studio bosses? And if so, what happened between this, like, and Gary, if this is a question that's better for later, please feel free to put it at the end, because it's a big topic. But you look at the Kardashians. Sorry, I can't believe I'm bringing up the Kardashians at a wit, wisdom and wine event. But look at where celebrity is at now versus, think about like the Judy Garlands and the Vivian Lees and these Joan Crawfords. So if this is a question for later, that's fine. But in my mind, I feel like, you had these studio bosses who were feeding questions to the grist mill, and now we have social media. We have TMZ. I don't know what's better, but and again, if that's a better question for the end. Fantastic.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you, because we're talking about the control the studios had over their actors and actresses. Yeah, social media today is absolutely has taken the place of that control. But I just think because the world isn't such a free for all kind of place, everybody's so very forgiving. I mean, let's face it, who would have thought that somebody who made a sex tape would become one of the biggest personalities the world has ever known, to a degree? If that had happened 50, 60, 70 years ago, they would have been written off forever and forgotten about. The studios would have done everything in their power to not only hush up, but they would have gotten rid of that actor or actress as if they never existed. So yeah, the world is a different place too. And I think that plays a lot into it. The world is a different place.
I'm sorry, because Kim, one of our attendees, had mentioned Judy. And Kim, forgive me, I don't remember, and you can come off mute. I don't remember if that was a documentary, but obviously you're talking about Judy Garland. And you think about what they did to that poor woman. It just breaks your heart, because she was beautiful and talented, and everything that you would think was good and talented, and they really ran her to the ground. So Kim,
So is Kim going to ask me something, or should I just address what you said?
I don't know. And so I was going to say, people, friends, if you have any questions, I am bogarting the chat. Please feel free to jump into the chat and ask questions if you have any of them. As I have shared earlier, I'm a freak for celebrities. So everything I want to know is going to be very boring. I think there are a lot of great questions out there. And but Gary, honestly, this is just fantastic. This is an insider's look that I think a lot of us are just kind of craving. So if you want to go ahead, please do so. But know that if there's a burning question, we will jump in. Okay.
I'm happy to address Judy because she is absolutely my all-time favorite of the people of that era. And when you think about it, Judy Garland was under contract to MGM for just 15 years. She was fired from the studio in 1950 at the age of 28. So by the age of 28 years old, she had already created the legend that we know as Judy Garland, had starred in some of their biggest successful films of all time. Meet Me in St. Louis, The Wizard of Oz, Summer Stock. Just seemed like everything, Easter Parade with Fred Astaire. It seemed like everything she was in turned to gold for the studio. But what's just interesting is by the age of 28, basically her film career was pretty much finished as far as the world was concerned. And then she probably is the perfect example of somebody who was completely used and somewhat abused by the studio system. There's talk that she was forced into an abortion with her first husband, songwriter David Rose, because the studio just could not afford to have her missing 6 months to a year of work. And remember, she was a musical star. So even though people are spending 12 to 15 hours a day on this set filming, imagine if you have to pre-record music and learn choreography. I mean, that's a 6-day a week right there. In fact, the studio used to send hair and makeup to her house when she was a kid at 4 a.m. to get started on the hair and makeup prior to her arrival at the studio, because she was only allowed to be at the studio so many hours during the day because of the Coogan Act and the laws protecting child actors. So the studio was able to get around that by having her hair and makeup done at the house, so that by the time she got to the studio, most of her hair and makeup was done. And they said people used to tell stories about how she would just be sleeping every chance she got at the studio. She was just so exhausted. But again, by the age of 28, is considered kind of washed up as far as Hollywood is concerned. But then her husband, Sid Luft, said, "What is it about Judy that people love? They love to hear her sing." So he's the one that instigated putting her on concert stages and brought her into the Palladium in London, where she had this 4-week engagement that just, the word spread throughout the world that she was back and was better than ever. And then they refurbished the Palace Theater in New York. In fact, the Palace Theater in New York stands today because of the renovations that Sid Luft did by putting Judy Garland in there in 1951. 1951, she opened at the Palace. A 7-week engagement was extended to a full 19 weeks. That's how much in demand tickets were for this girl. But and then they got the contract, they got the deal with Warner Brothers. And unfortunately, a 3-picture deal was only a 1-picture deal. And that was Judy Garland's version of A Star is Born in 1954. And Sid and Judy put together the best team of people they could to help make that film. And it really, Time magazine said it's considered the greatest one-woman show ever put on film. And I agree wholeheartedly. She was really something. And then, she's gone at the age of 47. Most people's careers today are kind of just really at their stride at 47. And Judy was done by that time. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, it was a pity. So I'm gonna go back to the photo we have on the screen, and I bet you could tell us lots of things that that have been filmed here. One of the things that I always thought was fascinating on these lots is that it's just plywood here in a lot of cases. Some of them were actually operational, but they just have latex bricks that are painted on them. And I don't know if that's the case in this particular picture, but take it away and tell us more about this.
We are looking at the former Columbia backlot. Columbia Studios started constructing on this property in Burbank in at about 1931-32, I think it was. Columbia Studios is at Sunset and Gower in Hollywood. This backlot is quite a distance away from there, but it was all about what could you afford. as a studio. Was there space next to your sound stages you could build these exterior sets? So I guess Harry Cohen, who was head of Columbia, got a great deal on this property and then built this backlot. What's fun is that Lucy did some of her early films here in the early 30s when she was under contract to Columbia. What the buildings we're looking at here in front of, well, I'm sure many of you would know this fountain because you see it in the opening credits to the TV show Friends. And that's probably how it's enjoyed its greatest success in the latter part of its career. But every one of those television shows and movies shot on that property, from films in the 30s and 40s and 50s up to television shows in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, has shot there. In fact, we're looking at Murphy Brown's apartment back there. That was also, I can't think of her name. She was the star of Linda, the star of Wonder Woman in the 1970s. That was her apartment was in one of those buildings. And then there's sort of the large
Linda
white
Carter?
building. Linda
Yeah,
Carter,
Linda Carter.
thank you. Thank you. Just went out of my head. And then the building to the right is one of the last vestiges of McMahon and Tate from the TV show Bewitched. So McMahon and Tate was the advertising firm that the character Darren Stevens worked in. Yes, even well, we don't want to get too scary because I know the last time you guys did this, you got a little fearful from some of the things being told, but this is all in fun. What you're looking at there.
Does anybody
is-
know? Anybody put their hand up? Do they know what
Oh, that's right.
this house is? I'm not seeing anybody.
Is this the, okay, when I saw this and I've looked at this not proposal, I've looked at this PowerPoint, so I know what this is, but I thought this was the father of the Bride House. Remember Steve Martin, Kimberly Williams, Martin Short, Diane Keaton of the Cat fame. I thought this was the father of the Bride House. Anybody else out there who thinks the same? Okay, nobody else is
it's not
agreeing
that
with
you
me.
can't use it in more than one. Is that right, Gary?
That's right. Yeah. To my knowledge, that film was not shot at this house, to my knowledge.
Okay, just checking, because when I saw the subsequent photos in this PowerPoint, I'm like, okay, I don't remember that movie correctly.
I'm not seeing
anybody
anybody's
else?
hand go up.
Any guesses? Put them in the chat. Put them in the chat. Okay.
We can give a hint.
Friend.
We could just say that this house is an iconic house from a particular genre of film. I guess we could give a big hint and say it's from the horror suspense genre. It's probably considered the granddaddy of the modern day suspense horror film.
Did you go visit this house in October, at the end of October, Gary?
Oh, I go every October. Oh, yeah, I do. I go every October after my experience there a couple of years ago.
Okay, so
Kim got it.
Yeah. Well, don't tell them that she got it.
Oh,
just say
come
Kim.
on.
Let's sigh. Good work, Kim.
Dun dun dun. All right.
Gary, tell your story here. This is just crazy. This was last year.
Okay, so this is, as you can see now, this is the house that Jamie Lee Curtis was babysitting in the John Carpenter film Halloween, considered the granddaddy of slasher films because it was sort of basically the first, as far as a lot of people are concerned. So it was the first Halloween of COVID, and I was having lunch down the street, and I thought, oh, I'll drive by the Halloween house. After all, it is Halloween. And I parked across the street, and I sat there for about an hour and a half, just watching car after car pull up with young men getting out, dressed just like Michael Myers, having their picture taken. And then every once in a while, when a tour bus would drive by, they would chase the tour bus and give the tourists a thrill. So I thought, God, I've got to get a picture of me with one of these Michael Myers. And so I'll tell you, I tried to talk to 2 or 3 of them. They would not talk. They would just nod and tilt their head, just like Michael Myers did. So they really stayed in character. I really appreciated that. So even though the horror genre is not my favorite, it was a really neat experience to have that. There we are at 1164 Morning Glory Circle. I'll leave it at that. Are we going to have people guess this or?
I don't know. I think this one's a hard one. I wasn't able to.
Okay, so I'm going to put this in the chat. 1164 Morning Glory Circle.
Mm-hmm.
And if
Come on,
you
friends.
guys guess it and you Google it, you have to say that you Googled it. Oh, somebody got it. Somebody has a guest on here
Well,
already.
of course it was Kim. It was Kim Edson. She's part of the library staff. They know all the things. That's not why we love them, but it's why we bring them to trivia night. Smarter
Yep.
than I am.
Yep.
Smarter
So
than the
Kim
average
did
bear.
guess Bewitched.
Well, good for
Good
you,
work,
Kim.
Kim.
I appreciate that. Yes, I do. I appreciate that. Warner Brothers recently was taken over by AT&T, and AT&T sold this property to another party. I'm not sure who it is exactly. So the big talk in town is that on this property, in addition to the Bewitched house, is the Dennis the Menace, the house that I Dream of Jeannie house, the Hazel house, the house that Kim McAfee, the character played by Anne Margaret from Bye Bye Birdie, is on that lot. It's just filled with some of the Partridge Family houses there. And there's talk that a lot of these houses may go the way of the Wrecking Ball. And so everyone's just waiting to,
Does
we're
somebody
all waiting to see what
live in this
happens.
house, or is this?
This is on the back lot at the old Columbia lot, the old Warner Holly, purchased by Warner Brothers in the 70s. So it was called the Warner Brothers Ranch for years. So no, that's
nobody
just a
ever
facade.
lived in
That's
this house.
Nobody ever did. There is a replica of this house in Santa Monica. This house was copied from an actual house in Santa Monica, California.
Wow.
You remember from the
that's
Patty LuPone TV show in the 90s, Life Goes On? It was also used for Life Goes On with Patty LuPone in the early 90s.
Oh, I love that show. See, these are the kind of things that you know that not everybody knows. Here's another house. This one, I think that most people should be able to guess. I mean,
yeah, it's pretty
right
iconic.
away.
Yeah.
I think it was part of most of our childhoods.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yep,
Kim,
we're all
Rick,
getting it.
Kim. Oh yeah.
And this was also a big thrill for me. Okay, look at you, Kim. Great. That was a thrill to be a part of this. As you know, HGTV bought the house about a year, I guess it's been 2 years now. And they wanted to, they purchased the house with the intention of making the inside of the house reflect what the house looked like on the television show. Because the floor plan of this house did not reflect at all what the house on the TV show looked like. So HGTV bought this and did an 8-part series of transforming this house to look just like it did on the actual television show. And the producers of this show found me online and said, we'd like to talk to you about being a part of this Brady renovation. What they wanted to do with me initially was they had their share of Brady fanatics out there that knew everything about the Brady Bunch and what they wore in each episode. But what they wanted to use me for was have me with a film crew or camera crew at Paramount Studios and walk around the lot so that they could see what it was like for those kids to work at a major film studio like Paramount at that time. But then unfortunately, Paramount put the nix on that because they thought that maybe one day they would like to do something like that. So I didn't get to do it, but I did help them to locate some major prop and set pieces. And I think they told me that I saved them a good 2 weeks of construction and research because of leading them to these prized possessions that they were able to use for this special. So I was a hero to them.
I don't know if it's general knowledge that this is a call sheet, but it's it kind of breaks down like minute by minute or maybe five minute or half-hour chunks of what a day is on a shoot and when people are supposed to arrive and be in makeup, and it's a roadmap so that you don't waste money, right, Gary?
That's right. Every film you watch, every television show you watch, everyone at the end of the day gets one of these to tell them what they're doing the following day. It tells them what time they need to be there. It tells them what time they'll be having lunch. It tells them where to report, if it's at the studio or on location. It's really a Bible. It really has everything. It tells you where the nearest hospital is in case you get hurt on the set. So it really is a very valuable piece of information, call sheets. And what's a fun thing to collect, there are collectors out there who collect call sheets. I met somebody who had a call sheet from The Wizard of Oz, Gone with the Wind, some Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers musicals. So of course I was like, must have. But they don't go for too cheap sometimes. But a lot of times things like that are found, within the last year, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences just opened a museum to honor the heritage of film, American film, and film from all over the world, but primarily American film. So with the announcement of this museum being built, many people who have families who've worked in the industry for the past 30, 40, 50, 60 plus years are finding things in closets and attics, and in some cases basements, and they're saying things like, oh, my great grandfather was a makeup man at MGM. He's got all these pictures with him with Joan Crawford and Jean Harlow. Do you want them? So this museum is getting all these really neat treasures that are being discovered all over Southern California. And one of the things they said is people are actually finding Oscars in shoe boxes and in moving boxes and banker boxes that were won by people, usually technical awards like sound effects editing and things like that. And then somebody passes away and the house gets packed, and then some things don't get unpacked. And sometimes Oscars are sitting in a moving box for many, many, many years until they're discovered.
They went through a variety of different medals and qualities over the years, the construction of the Oscar Award. Is that correct?
That is correct. And a fun piece of trivia is that the statue was actually designed by a man named Cedric Gibbons. Cedric Gibbons was the head of the art department at MGM, and Cedric Gibbons designed all the sets to The Wizard of Oz, including Munchkinland. So that's a fun piece of trivia that ties together Oscar with it's a great, great heritage that it represents. Yeah, during World War II, because they couldn't use metals, they had to make the Oscars out of plaster. And so all during World War II, all the Oscars were plaster. Then once the war was over and metal was plentiful again, people were able to trade their Oscars in for the proper Oscar, which is 24 karat gold plated nickel and bronze.
Wow. So this on the left is you when you were a bit younger. Did you sneak onto the set that time, or were you invited there? And then this looks like the remodel on the right. Is that correct?
That's correct. That is the first, the picture on the left is me on the set of the very first Brady Bunch movie, the first parody. That was on the set of the film. And they did a spectacular job. In fact, they used, because both the original television show was filmed at Paramount, they were able to access the original blueprints for the sets. So that was easy for the set dressers, made their job a lot easier. And so after the TV show, the HGTV show was done, I was invited to spend an entire day just roaming the house at my leisure. It was great fun.
So this was the time that you were invited instead of breaking or sneaking, or?
I did not have to sneak in that time. That is correct. I had the invitation in hand and was greeted at the door with great applause. And then I was lucky because the suits from New York were there that day. Oh. So I was able to go up and introduce myself as the guy that saved them 2 weeks worth of shooting, because I was able to get them some pieces. In fact, some of the pieces I got was that the furniture there in the den, the chairs there around the den table there. So
oh, wow, those are cool chairs.
Yeah. And there I am with one of the stars of the Brady Bunch, the great Florence Henderson. She couldn't have been a nicer lady. God, she was so kind and so nice. And that picture was taken when she came and spoke at the Screen Actors Guild. Screen Actors Guild puts together these afternoons where they'll get stars to come and speak and talk about their careers, and you can ask them questions, and it's just really a lot of fun. And
it is.
Cloris Leachman, yeah, it's a lot of fun. Cloris Leachman did one. I'm still waiting for like Tom Cruise and those guys to do it, but Florence Henderson was good, and so was Cloris Leachman. She was a lot of fun. Mickey Rooney came once. That was a lot of fun, getting to banter with Mickey Rooney about his good friend Judy. He loves talking about Judy Garland, or loved talking about her. So he and I had about 6 minutes together.
Did you stock stars at Friars Club at all?
Nope, I've never been to a Friars Club event.
Oh, really?
No. Yeah, I never have. And here we have a little color.
So before you go on, Friars Club, again, as not everybody, I've been talking about my celebrity obsession. What is the Friars Club? I do not know.
Sorry. Go ahead, Gary.
So, no offense. Well, no offense, but surprisingly, I have no clue what you're talking about. What is that?
It's the organization of comedians, and they honor comedians from stand-up, film, television, and they come together and they do these massive charity events, and they'll pick somebody who they will honor or roast for the evening. And so that's what one of the things the Friars Club does is so like Joan Rivers probably was one of the first women to be honored. Of course, Lucille Ball was honored. Probably Eve Arden was probably part of that as well. But probably the big honorees, of course, have been like Don Rickles, Lenny Bruce. I'm not sure if he was, but he would have been a prime candidate to be honored by the Friars Club. So it's all about comedy.
Yeah, so they've turned that into TV events now, and like yeah, so the original roast was done at the Friars Club, and now you've seen some roasts on TV that they make public,
They have
Comedy
certainly
Central that
evolved.
did that.
Yes,
Yeah.
those have evolved. Yeah, the what they get away with the language is off the charts.
Yeah. Should we go around and look at some of these photos? Do you want to start with the top left one? And
Okay, so I'll start with I'm in the white shirt there, and that's me with Lily Tomlin. And Lily Tomlin and I share the same birthday. And so it's to the point now that whenever I encounter her in Los Angeles, she says, "Oh yeah, we have the same birthday, right?" So I've made an impression at some point. So I've got to work with her a couple times over the years at some charity events. And in fact, she and Jane Fonda do Grace and Frankie at Paramount. So it was fun to roam that set and be on that set over at Paramount. And then just above that is me on stage with Patti LaBelle. She wanted to have somebody come up on stage and sing with her, and I was sitting in the front row, and I raised my hand along with half the other guys in the audience, and I got picked. And I got to go up and sing a song for her called "Somebody Loves You, Baby." And so I would just happen to have my camera in my pocket. And she even jokingly said to the audience, "It's not enough for him to get to sing with me. He's got to get a picture too." So that was fun. She was very kind. And then there I am in red with Joan Rivers. That's when she had her late night talk show on Fox back in the mid, like 85, 86. And she held a contest. And if you won the contest, you got to co-host an episode of her show with her. I didn't win the contest, but she sent me this beautiful letter thanking me for entering the contest. And she said, "If you're ever in Los Angeles, please come see my show. And here's my assistant's name." And so, of course, I made plans to do that. And she was very kind, very, very nice. And I since then, I had encountered her quite a few times over the years in Los Angeles, and I would always bring that up. And she would always be nice and sometimes give me a hug for being a loyal fan. And there's me and Charo. That was taken on a cruise ship in the Caribbean. And Charo, who was married to Xavier Cugat, who actually gave Desi Arnaz his first job in the United States, in Miami, was neighbors with Lucy and Desi. Xavier Cugat was married to Charo in the early 60s, and they lived behind the alley of Lucy and Desi. So that's kind of interesting. I mean, I don't think it was planned. It just kind of happened. And Charles still lives in that house today, right at Lexington Avenue. But I guess I won't give out the address. And there I am with Jane Russell. Jane there in the teal blue. That was taken outside her RKO dressing room when she did when she was under contract to Howard Hughes at RKO. And that's also the same dressing room that Lucia Ball ended up occupying in the late 50s. And so there's a great story behind that. I won't tell it now. It's just a long story, but how it is that she came to be there with me that day is a wonderful story. Maybe I'll save it for another time. And then there I am down below with Debbie Reynolds. Debbie, of course, was one of the great collectors of movie memorabilia. And I was a crew member on a cruise ship that she was the headliner on. And I got to spend about 3 hours with her one night in a lounge from midnight to about 3 o'clock in the morning, just talking about Hollywood history and her vast collection of movie props and costumes. And the last thing she said to me was, "I'll see you later, Gary. Don't forget, it's up to us to save Hollywood." I'll never forget that. And then there I am with Lucy Arnaz, Lucille Ball's daughter. And she and I were having a real nice talk about Desilu and how the Desilu Gower property was her favorite of all the Desilu properties there. And then coming all the way to the bottom right there, if it's on your right side as well, is Diana Ross. The picture was taken on Valentine's Day 1984, outside the Circle Star Theater in San Carlos, California. Everyone said Diana Ross would be mean and snotty and not friendly. She couldn't have been nicer to me. She was really a nice lady. So I have good things to say. And then just above us is Joan Collins. I was not supposed to take that picture with her. In fact, when I snapped the camera, she said, I didn't give you permission to take that photograph. And I showed it to her. I said, well, it came out okay. She said, oh, I suppose. And off she went.
You would get
So-
away with things that I think most people wouldn't, because you have such a nice way about you, and you know things. You speak to stars' egos and things. I don't know.
I think I know. I think I know just how to say what it is I have to say. That's not threatening or boring, you know. So, yeah.
So we got,
Nice.
we did get, it was a tie between Elizabeth Taylor and Celine Dion Star Trek. So I think we should tell both stories.
Well, we'll start out with Celine and Star Trek because you get two. It's a twofer. I was working for the Arsenio Hall show, and Celine Dion was a guest on the show this one night. And Celine Dion at the time was a huge Star Trek fan, and at the time they were shooting Star Trek: The Next Generation at Paramount, and so they made arrangements for Celine and her brother to visit the set, and I was instructed to drive them over to the soundstage on Arsenio Hall's golf cart. And they kept saying to me, they kept drilling it into my head, you will not be going onto the soundstage. It's just going to be them. You'll wait for them outside the stage door, and they'll come out whenever they finish getting their tour of the set. And I said, okay, whatever, fine, you know. So I drive them over there. And while we were driving from Arsenio's stage to the Star Trek stage, Celine said to me, once we got out of earshot of all the powers that be, she says, Gary, I understand that you're not allowed to come onto the soundstage. She said, but since you're with me, you'll be coming onto that soundstage. So I got to go tour that soundstage with Celine and her brother, big Star Trek fans. So that's the Celine Dion story, and tied in with Star Trek. Elizabeth Taylor was the same thing. Here goes Elizabeth Taylor's coming to the Arsenio Hall show. She was one of the great, we didn't have a lot of those great stars. We had her, we had Lauren Bacall, we had Jerry Lewis. But I mean, here was one of the great icons from Hollywood's past. And I was so excited to get to be that close with her and maybe interact with her. And again, everyone kept saying, Gary, it's that you know, you can't bother her and don't approach her and don't speak with her unless she speaks to you first. And the usual things you hear when you're a young PA working on a TV show or a movie set. Anyway, so I overheard one of Elizabeth's people telling one of our people that Miss Taylor would not be staying for the whole show. As soon as she's finished, she would be leaving the soundstage to her waiting car. I went, So I thought, well, I'm going to go outside and maybe I can have an encounter with her outside. And sure enough, there was her driver with the car door right there. He was standing next to the door, maybe smoking a cigarette. And I started up a conversation with him. And either he was going to engage with me or he wasn't. Well, he really did engage. And we had this really nice, about 10, 12-minute conversation, just talking about what it's like to work in the entertainment industry, to work for a big star like Elizabeth Taylor, and how, you know, how gracious she was to be around. Suddenly, the door to the stage flew open, and there was all the yes men from both Arsenio and Elizabeth Taylor, all escorting her outside to her car. And I was standing with Elizabeth's driver. And so he says, Gary, it's time for me to go to work. It's been a pleasure talking to you. So he opens up the car door, which leaves me standing next to the open door, while she just instinctively put her hand out for me to help her into the car. So of course, I immediately put my hand out for her to take. Well, that's when her driver took the cue to just make the day for me. He says, Elizabeth, this is Gary. He's a big fan of yours. He really likes you a lot. And she says, well, I like him too. And so at that moment, I kissed her hand. She got into the car.
Oh,
Because there was nothing
I
that
was
they
going to say,
could-
we were getting to the good part.
you
Rewind.
hit mute.
Rewind.
You're the king
Okay,
of
so tell me.
drama.
Okay, so did you hear where I said the door opened and she was coming out of the door?
Yes,
Stage
and then
with-
and she took your hand, and he said that you're a
And he
big
said,
fan.
This is Gary. He's a big fan of yours. He really likes you a lot. And she in turn said, well, I like him too. And so because my hand was in hers, I took her hand and I kissed it. And she got into the car and away she sailed off into the distance. So I got to have my cake and eat it too. And then there stood all of the naysayers who told me I couldn't speak with Elizabeth Taylor, who had nothing to say. They just had to stand there, their arms crossed, going, well, you got what you wanted after all. So it was good for me. Good for me.
Yeah. Oh, so many great stories that you have and so much knowledge. I mean, thank you so
Well,
much for being here.
I'll tell you people out there, something I'm putting together is a series of presentations based on basically kind of what we were doing here today. And I'm going to be doing them on cruise ships. So when you're going and taking a cruise over the next few years, keep an eye out in the entertainment section and see if I'm one of their guest speakers. So.
Yeah, I think when we were in the program, we were going to talk a little bit about how you snuck onto the Matterhorn ride. So maybe you could, I know we're a little bit over, but I don't want to disappoint anybody if they want to hear that story.
Yeah, that's kind of a fun thing. I was working on a TV special called Circus of the Stars Goes to Disneyland. And I got hired to be a talent escort for that. We were shot there for about 3 days. And so we were there at night after the park closed. The park was closing at about 6 o'clock. So we would be there from about 4 in the afternoon to about 4 o'clock in the morning. I loved it. To be at Disneyland with nobody there, yet all the lights are still on and sometimes the atmosphere music is playing. It was really a wonderful place to be. So we were using the Matterhorn and they were going to use the apparatus that Tinkerbell uses to fly off the top of the Matterhorn. They always have an aerialist dressed as Tinkerbell during the fireworks who flies off the top of the Matterhorn over the castle and into Frontierland. So they had an actress from a sitcom who was going to be doing that. And so I was assigned to her. So I had to walk her over to the Matterhorn. And then they took her up to the top just so she could get a feel for what was going on up there. But they were like, oh, you can't go up there. You have to stay here and you'll just have to wait for her. And I thought, God, I just want to see what it looks like from the top of the Matterhorn. Kind of spent my whole life coming to Disneyland. I'm obsessed with seeing this, riding this ride. And anyway, the person who was there to guard the Matterhorn stepped away, maybe to use the restroom or make a phone call. So I, without missing a beat, just went right up that ladder to the top. And of course, once you look like if you act like you know what you're doing, nobody really questions you. And so there I was at the top of the Matterhorn, looking down that cable as it went all the way down across the park. That was a really great experience. Of course, a few minutes later, that person came back and just kind of looked at me like, another one. So didn't matter. I didn't hurt anything. So it was great fun.
Does anybody have any questions for Gary?
Well, I was going to say, we are now in what I like to call the magic hour, which is we have gone past what we have allotted for time with Gary. And I'm having the best time ever. So I just wanted to say that if anybody does need to move on, it's 9:05. But as anybody knows who have been part of this this experience before, Gary is on the Pacific Coast, so it's 7 o'clock his time. It's 9 o'clock our time, so I'm having a great time, and I'm willing to keep this going. So please, if anybody has questions, drop them into the chat. There's so many wonderful stories that you have, Gary. This is wonderful. So again, it's witching hour.
Okay, so while they're maybe doing that, I'll kind of talk about what's behind me here. Here is a picture of Judy Garland from 1950 from the film Summer Stock. And then over here we have a picture of Lucille Ball. Next to Lucy here in red is the great and wonderful Lena Horne from her one-woman show, Lena Horne, the Lady and Her Music. And then just next to Lena there is a poster commemorating a Shirley MacLaine one-woman show that she did on Broadway.
And your genie bottle is there too.
One of several is, yeah, right there. One of several is there. That's right. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So what's funny about when you were talking about that genie bottle, my grandfather used to collect Jim Beam bottles. Alas, he did not leave me I Dream of Jeannie bottle, but I have actually a couple from his 1970s collection, and I did not know that was a collectible. So that's fantastic.
I didn't know that it came from a Jim Beam bottle either.
Is that
I know.
insane?
It's yet so easy. And that prop guy, I hope he got the kudos, because that prop has gone down in history for television aficionados to have
Is
that
that
genie
in,
bottle.
so? And I see wonderful comments. Thank you for sharing your experiences. When you were talking about the different Oscars, I found myself thinking about Haley Mills from The Parent Trap, and she just recently was given an Oscar. She had lost hers at one point. She recently wrote a memoir, and I guess she was reunited with her juvenile Oscar. Um, this is
And
just fantastic.
fortunately for Haley, is they did not replace the Oscar with the smaller juvenile. They gave her the full-size Oscar. So she's right now the only one of all the people who've won a juvenile Oscar. Of course, that includes Judy Garland, Mickey Rooney, Margaret O'Brien, have all won juvenile Oscars, but theirs are a much smaller Oscar. They're about, maybe about 5 inches in height.
It's tiny. Yeah. Okay, so
Yeah.
I feel horrible because like I was starting to break in and bogarting the mic again. Sorry, Brenda and Gary. But friends who have stayed, I'm not saying that this is like the good part of the evening. I do have one interesting question that I would like to pose Gary. Obviously, I want to open this up to anybody else who wants to ask questions. But so I guess my question is, Gary, have you ever met anybody that you were absolutely starstruck by that you could not like? It's
Keep
true.
myself together.
Yeah. Is there anybody? I mean, you met.
I can't imagine that would be the case because
Well. So the question is there anybody that you were absolutely starstruck by? But then the second part of the question is why are you immune? Not immune, but how have you been able to kind of surmount what I think the rest of us would feel like, holy cow, that's Haley Mills. I loved her. Blah blah blah. I mean, what? So
I
anybody
think I know
starstruck?
the answer to that, and I don't mean to creep in on Gary, but
Well, no. So no. You have to hold on because Brenda, I'm asking you questions next.
Oh.
FYI, everybody, stay here. I know it's 9:10 p.m. Central Time, but I'm going to grill our executive director next. So Gary, you're on the hot seat here.
Let's see.
Anybody
Okay.
starstruck?
I don't think there was, well, but maybe Barbara Streisand, if I had to
Okay,
pick
that's
one,
understandable right
if
there.
I could pick one. But how I met her was really interesting circumstances. Had just moved to Los Angeles, and Chevy Chase was hosting a party in Malibu because he'd just been signed to do the Chevy Chase late night talk show that lasted about, I don't know, 3.5 months, I think. And so I was hired to work as a waiter at this party. And because I had zero experience with this particular catering company, they said we would never send a new person at a high profile event like this. So we're just shorthanded. So just don't do anything you're not supposed to do. Fine. So initially I was just supposed to stay and do the scullery, but they needed more people out on the floor, just keeping things flowing. So a lot of people were drinking champagne. So I was told to just keep people's glasses filled with champagne. And I happened to notice that Barbara Streisand, who was like this tall, was drinking champagne. So I made it my business to keep an eye on her glass to see if it ever needed refilling. And sure enough, it did. So I made my way over to her. I was only standing maybe 3 feet away. So she's holding the glass and like this pen will be my flute. And she was talking to some other large luminaries. I want to say Sidney Pollack maybe was one of them who directed her in The Way We Were. And so I took the glass, I took the bottle to pour it, to refill it. And without missing a beat, she put her hand over the glass. She never deviated from her conversation with who she was talking to. And she kept her hand over it. And I didn't move. I just sort of stood there. And then she finished the conversation. And then she looked at me and she said, I just wanted to finish this and take this sip so I don't mix the room temperature with the fresh cold champagne. So she took that last sip and she goes, now you can fill it. So
Okay.
I was completely
Wow.
disarmed. I was disarmed completely. So
It's a good
just
thing
kind
you
of,
stayed there.
Yeah, good thing I did stay. So that was fun because it wasn't anything planned. It wasn't calculating anything. It just sort of happened. So it was great.
That is incredible. And so I'm sorry, alas, Brenda. And again, we have met some people have gone on to their evenings. So we have a wonderful, intimate crowd of people who are hanging out with us right now. Um, I have known you for a few years, and I think it's time, Brenda, for you to tell us how you met Gary and how you relate to all of this. This is the Easter egg of this event because I know that you have a Henry Winkler story. I saw the other day that you posted a letter from Betty White, the late great blessed Betty White. So Brenda, it's time for you to open up the
I met Gary when he
open
gave
up.
me a tour of Paramount.
Yes,
Yeah.
but so hey Brenda, why do you have all these celebrity connections?
Because I lived in Los Angeles for a number of years, and I was a page with Gary, but he was like the page extraordinaire. So he would come into page training, and he would teach us how to give the tours and give
So
us.
please, so rewind. What is a page? I have no clue. Again, I grew up in the
Okay,
cornfields of
well, I
Iowa.
think I'll let the page extraordinaire answer that question.
So Gary,
okay.
Gary, my friend, FY, I'm going to call you a friend. What is a page? I don't, I like it, again. I think one of those things, and this is probably not fair to a lot of other people on the call here, but I've always been intrigued by like the celebrity life. I live in the Midwest. I grew up in Iowa. I grew up on a farm. And you hear these wonderful stories about people like Judy Garland, who grew up in Grand Rapids. You hear about these people who are elevated to these stratosphere. And I think there's a glimmer of all of us, even if we, no matter what age we are, who think to ourselves, wow, what is the difference between me and Ashton Kutcher from Iowa? Okay, I'm bringing up Ashton Kutcher because he's from Iowa. Obviously, he's funnier. Obviously, he married an adorable, gorgeous woman. But celebrity is intriguing. So, so anyway, it's just one of those things. I'm intrigued to know this. How did you guys get into this? What was the key that opened the door to this library of awesomeness?
Well, a page, I guess, in medieval times was a young boy who basically was like a gopher, who was just there to do the bidding of the powers that be. A page in television and in film at a studio, our job was to seat the audiences for the television shows. Our job was at Paramount anyway, was to give tours of the studio. But the really interesting thing for a lot of the pages was we were also an on the lot temp pool. So various departments at the studio would be shorthanded because somebody called in sick, or they were shorthanded. They needed people. So as opposed to calling a temp agency, they would just use the pages that were on the lot. So it was an opportunity for all of us to work in many, many different departments at the studio. So if publicity was your thing, you got a chance to probably work in the publicity department. So literally 1 week you'd be in the mailroom. The next week you would be outside Brandon Tartikoff's office answering phones in the reception area. It was that extreme. So you got a chance to sample everything on that lot. So that's how a lot of people got jobs. They temped for a few weeks, and then people in show business, they love when they can trust you and that you're familiar. So a lot of people started out just temping for a few weeks and ended up getting full-time jobs in various departments at the studio. So that's what a page at Paramount does. You gave tours, you sat audiences for television shows, and you gave away tickets for the TV shows. And then you were also part of this on the lot temp pool that, sometimes started your whole career.
Yeah,
So
one of my glamorous
that's a page.
temp jobs was they were doing inventory at facilities. So I got to count like nuts and bolts and screws and so yeah,
Facilities
maybe
is
you
where everybody
got to
got their
answer the
zero.
phones for Brandon Tartikoff.
Okay,
Well,
so I'm going to interrupt. Okay, so two things. Okay, Brandon Tartikoff. I obviously know who that is because I've been like reading US Weekly since I was like yay high. And then Brenda, since I said you have to tell your Henry Winkler story. And because it's awesome. So okay, who's Brandon first and foremost, or Mr. Tartikoff?
Brandon Tartikoff was a whiz kid who turned NBC around when it was faltering in the 70s and 80s. And he took NBC from third place and put them in the number one place in the 1980s. And so he was brought in to be head of Paramount Studios. He was only head for a very short time because he had an ill child. But his wife, Lily Tartikoff, one of the big humanitarians in the entertainment industry. So he just happened to be one of the people that was in place as head of the studio during my time as a page. So that's why I used him as an example. So that's who Brandon Tartikoff was. He has since passed away. He died at a very young age, unfortunately.
I was going to say he was extremely young. And I remember that name from not way back when, but anyway. So, okay, Brenda.
Yeah.
Tell us, as your audience, how are you involved in all of this?
Well, I was a page just like Gary, and while Gary was able to charm people and do things that maybe he wasn't supposed to as much, I just followed all the rules and didn't want to like ruffle any feathers or get in trouble. And so I was walking around the lot and I saw Henry Winkler and I thought, oh, I better not make eye contact. I better not do anything because I don't want to get in trouble like I'm approaching a star. And he said to me, hello, like I'm a person. Why aren't you saying hello?
This was Henry Winkler.
Yeah.
Henry Winkler said this.
The Fonz.
The Fonz.
He's an extremely nice guy, I think. Yeah. Did you ever have any encounters with him, Gary, on the lot? Because he had an office, a production office.
Yeah. I've actually seen him drive down my street right here in West Hollywood a couple of times over the years. So either he uses my street, which dead ends into Paramount, or maybe he lives somewhere in this area. I don't know. But yeah, he was one of the more approachable people.
Could you have him call me the next time you see him on your street? Because he's written children's books, and I think he would be great at Wit, Wisdom, and Wine at the library.
We would like the funds for Wit, Wisdom, and Wine. I'm just saying.
Brenda, I think you should reach out to him. You just might get him for 10, 15 minutes one night. He might be happy to do that. He just might be happy to.
Yeah.
All you can do is ask.
That's right. That's right. And that's the key to a lot of your encounters is, you've had a bit of information about somebody and had a natural curiosity, and it's led to conversations, and you've had these memories that have happened, and you have muted yourself again. And I would just kind of steer clear of people unless they ask me a question. I only worked at the mailroom once as a temp for a page, and I ended up having to drop something off in Penelope Spheris's office, and she asked me a question about a script she was working on, and I don't even remember what it was anymore. And she said, do you like this or do you like that better? And I'm like, I just answered the question, and because I was a little rule follower, and then I asked if she needed anything else, and then I moved on to get to my other deliveries. And so you probably would have sat there and had a 15-minute conversation with her. I didn't.
If you mentioned Penelope Spheris, I feel bad because I don't see Adam here anymore, because Adam Dickinson would know Penelope Spheris was instrumental in Wayne's World. So again, it's one of those really weird things where I still recognize names. I'm just looking at, she did the Beverly Hillbillies movie in 1993. She did the Little Rascals in 1994.
It's like you're Googling.
I am Googling. I want to be as educated as I can be in the moment. But it's just so funny that you guys are talking about this. And again, these are names that I recognize. Anybody else? So I don't know, Brenda, if people would feel more emboldened if we turned off the recording. Because again, that's always when the good stories come out.